Jake Morrison had always prided himself on being able to sell ice to polar bears, sand to desert dwellers, and extended warranties to literally anyone with a pulse. What he hadn't counted on was trying to explain the concept of entrepreneurial coffee distribution to a 7-foot-tall purple alien who looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a particularly angry accountant. "So let me get this straight," Warden Claxon rumbled, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence like a broken traffic light. "You were caught with 17 tons of illegal stimulants aboard an unregistered vessel, and your defense is that you're in the beverage industry?" Jake leaned back in his cell's remarkably uncomfortable chair, which seemed designed by someone who had heard about human anatomy third-hand and decided to wing it. "Look, Claxy, can I call you Claxy? The coffee bean trade is completely legitimate where I come from. How was I supposed to know your people consider caffeine a controlled substance? That's like making chocolate illegal. Chocolate is illegal in the Outer Rim territories. Well, that explains why everyone out there looks so miserable." The warden's translator device made a sound like a confused printer. "You realize you're in the Nexus Prime Detention Center, the most secure prison facility in 17 star systems. We house war criminals, genocidal dictators, and that one guy who invented telemarketing for the entire Andromeda sector. And now you've got a guy whose only crime was trying to bring a little perk to people's mornings. Really moving up in the world, aren't you?" Jake gestured around the cell, which looked like a spacecraft bathroom had gotten into a fight with a corporate office and both had lost. "Speaking of which, who designed this place? Because I've got to tell you, the feng shui is terrible. You've got negative energy flowing everywhere. No wonder your prisoners are probably depressed. Bad for rehabilitation, worse for employee morale." Claxon blinked all 4 eyes simultaneously, which Jake had learned was either confusion or the alien equivalent of a migraine. "Employee morale? Mon? Sure. Guards, administrators, whoever runs the cafeteria. This lighting is giving everyone the blues. And don't get me started on the color scheme. Purple walls, orange floors, green ceiling. What is this? A children's playground designed by someone having a nervous breakdown? It's supposed to be psychologically disorienting to prevent escape attempts. It's psychologically disorienting, all right, but not in a good way. You want to keep prisoners in line? Make them comfortable but not too comfortable. Give them something to lose. This place just makes everyone want to leave as fast as possible, which is counterproductive to your whole imprisonment business model." The warden made that printer noise again. In his 47 years of running the facility, he had never had a prisoner critique his interior decorating choices. Most inmates spent their time planning elaborate escapes, writing angry manifestos, or in the case of the telemarketing inventor, but composing increasingly creative apology letters to the universe. "Are you actually trying to consult me on prison management?" "Hey, I'm just making observations. Back on Earth, I turned around a failing car lot in Detroit. Same principles apply. You've got inventory, overhead costs, customer satisfaction issues. Though I guess in your case, customer satisfaction is more about keeping people from rioting than getting them to buy the extended warranty." Claxon found himself actually considering the human's words, which was troubling on several levels. The facility had been dealing with increased unrest lately, and the employee satisfaction surveys had been less than stellar. Not that he was going to admit that to a prisoner. "You were arrested for smuggling illegal substances across 3 sectors of space." "I was arrested for being an entrepreneur in an underserved market." "There's a difference." 3 days later, Jake was still critiquing prison operations when Commander Vex showed up at his cell looking like someone had told her that her favorite planet had been cancelled. Vex was what humans might politely call imposing and impolitely call the stuff of nightmares. She stood 8 feet tall, had skin like metallic armor, and possessed the kind of presence that made seasoned warriors suddenly remember urgent business elsewhere. "Human Morrison," she began, her voice carrying the sort of authority that could make mountains reconsider their altitude, "we need to discuss your species." Oh good, are we finally talking about prisoner rights? Because I've got a whole presentation ready about the ergonomic disasters you call furniture. We are talking about war. Jake paused mid-complaint. War? What kind of war? Like metaphorical war on poverty, war on bad customer service, or actual shoot people with space lasers war? The latter. The Zephyrian Empire has been locked in conflict with the Nexus Coalition for 17 standard cycles. We are, to use your human terminology, getting our collective posteriors handed to us. 17 years? Wow. And let me guess, you've tried everything. Bigger guns, more ships, strongly worded diplomatic letters? All of the above. Jake leaned forward with the expression he used when a customer was about to buy the most expensive car on the lot. But you haven't tried human strategic thinking. Commander Vex's 4 arms crossed simultaneously. Human strategic thinking? Oh yeah, we're legendary for it. I mean, we've been fighting wars since before we figured out agriculture. We turned warfare into an art form, then turned the art form into entertainment, then turned the entertainment into a multi-billion credit industry. We've got more tactical knowledge in our pinky fingers than most species have in their entire military academies. This was, of course, complete nonsense. Jake's military experience consisted of playing strategy games on his phone and half remembering action movies. But Commander Vex didn't know that. What she did know was that human reputation in the galaxy was built on a mixture of fear, confusion, and heavily embellished stories from the few humans who had ventured into space before Jake. You are proposing what exactly? I'm proposing a business arrangement. You give me a ship, a crew, and my freedom, and I'll end your war. You'll end our war. Guaranteed, or your money back. Vex's translator made several concerning sounds. You want us to give you a warship? Look, Commander, let me break this down for you in terms you can understand. You've got a problem. I've got a solution. You've been trying to solve this problem the same way for 17 years, and it's not working. That's the definition of insanity. You need fresh perspective. Outside-the-box thinking, innovative approaches to conflict resolution. You were arrested for smuggling coffee. I was arrested for thinking bigger than the established market would allow. Same skill set, different application. Besides, what have you got to lose? If I fail, you're exactly where you are now, except you're out 1 ship and 1 prisoner. If I succeed, you win a war that's been bleeding you dry for nearly 2 decades. Commander Vex found herself actually considering this proposal, which should have been her first warning that the human was more dangerous than his arrest record suggested. The war had indeed been a disaster. The Nexus Coalition seemed to anticipate every Zephyrian strategy, counter every tactical innovation, and generally make the Empire's military leadership look like they were commanding through interpretive dance. What class of vessel would you require? Jake tried to keep the surprise off his face. He had honestly expected to be laughed out of the cell, possibly literally. Well, you know, something with good fuel efficiency, comfortable accommodations for the crew, adequate firepower for negotiations. What have you got available? We could assign you the Cosmic Vengeance. It's a Titan-class dreadnought. Titan class. Right, that sounds impressive. What's the mileage like on one of those? Mileage? Operational range. Fuel consumption. Maintenance costs. You know, the practical considerations. Commander Vex consulted her data pad. The Cosmic Vengeance is 2.7 kilometers long, carries a crew of 3,000, and has enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Jake nodded as if he dealt with moon-sterilizing dreadnoughts every Tuesday. Sounds perfect. When can I take it for a test drive? The Cosmic Vengeance was not what Jake had expected, mainly because he had been expecting something roughly the size of a large airplane. Instead, he found himself standing in a docking bay that could have housed several city blocks, but staring up at a ship that looked like someone had decided to make a skyscraper airworthy and then given up halfway through the process. "Sweet mother of markup percentages," Jake muttered, craning his neck to see the top of the vessel. "They actually gave me this thing." "Correction," came a clipped voice behind him. "They gave us this thing." Jake turned to find a Zephyrian officer who looked like she had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in disapproval. Captain Torres was roughly human-sized, which was a relief, but carried herself with the sort of military bearing that suggested she could court-martial someone just by looking at them sternly. "Captain Torres, I presume. Jake Morrison, your new strategic consultant." Strategic consultant. Torres managed to pack an impressive amount of skepticism into 2 words. "I have been commanding vessels in the Imperial Fleet for 23 standard years. I have participated in 47 major engagements and countless minor skirmishes. My tactical record is exemplary." "I'm sure it is. And now you get to learn some new tricks. Think of it as professional development." Torres made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could be weaponized. Professional development. From a smuggler. Former smuggler. Current strategic innovator. Future winner of this war you've been fighting for 17 years. Before Torres could respond, they were joined by what appeared to be a very enthusiastic beach ball with arms. The alien bounced over to them with the energy of a caffeinated puppy and began speaking in rapid, high-pitched bursts. "Human strategist. Real human strategist. This is most exciting day of my career. I am Engineer Pip. I have studied human tactical methodologies extensively. Well, I have read 3 articles about human tactical methodologies, which is more than anyone else in the fleet." Jake found himself grinning despite the situation. "Engineer Pip, good to meet you. What kind of articles?" "Oh, fascinating studies. The human approach to asymmetric warfare, psychological operations in Terran military history, and why humans are terrifying, a comprehensive analysis. That last one was mostly about your species' tendency to run toward danger while making loud noises." "That does sound like us." Their conversation was interrupted by a sound like a landslide having an argument with a garbage disposal. This turned out to be Grox, the weapons specialist, who apparently communicated primarily through various forms of rumbling. He was roughly the size and shape of a small building, with skin that looked like it had been borrowed from a tank. "Grox says he is pleased to serve under human command," Pip translated helpfully. "Also, he wants to know if it is true that humans bite their enemies." "Only on special occasions," Jake replied. "Now, shall we have a look at our new office?" The tour of the Cosmic Vengeance was both impressive and depressing. Impressive because the ship was genuinely massive, with enough firepower to make small planets reconsider their life choices. Depressing because it was laid out like a bureaucratic nightmare designed by committee. "Okay, first things first," Jake announced as they stood on the bridge, which was roughly the size of a football field and about as user-friendly as tax code. "We're going to need some modifications." "Modifications?" Torres asked in the tone usually reserved for discussing communicable diseases. "The bridge is all wrong. You've got the captain's chair way over there, the tactical station is behind a pillar, and the communications array is positioned so the operator has to shout across half the ship to be heard. It's like someone designed this thing without ever considering that people might need to actually use it. This is a standard Imperial bridge configuration. This is a standard Imperial disaster waiting to happen. We're going to rearrange everything for maximum efficiency. And I'm going to need a coffee machine installed." A coffee machine. Essential for strategic thinking. Also, we need to do something about the lighting. This harsh blue stuff is giving me a headache, and if I can't think clearly, we can't win this war. Torres looked like she was reconsidering her entire career path. "You want to redecorate the bridge of a dreadnought." "I want to optimize our command center for peak performance." "There's a difference. Grox made a rumbling sound that Pip translated as mild curiosity about human decorating preferences. Within hours, Jake had the crew rearranging furniture, installing softer lighting, and positioning workstations in what he called intuitive conversation clusters. Torres watched this transformation with the expression of someone witnessing the slow collapse of everything she held dear. This is madness. This is feng shui, Jake corrected. Ancient human art of arranging spaces for optimal energy flow. Feng shui. Trust me, Captain. You're about to see strategic thinking like you've never imagined. Jake's first military engagement began with what military historians would later classify as the most successful case of mistaken identity in recorded galactic history. 3 days out from port, the Cosmic Vengeance encountered what Jake assumed was a space-based truck stop. Captain Torres, Jake called out from his newly relocated command chair, which was now positioned for optimal bridge visibility and coffee machine access. Let's pull up to that station there. I want to ask for directions to the nearest conflict zone. Torres stared at her tactical display with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. Commander, that is not a civilian station. That is a Nexus Coalition battle group. A what now? 12 enemy warships in attack formation, moving to intercept us. Jake squinted at the main display, where several ominous-looking dots were indeed converging on their position. They seem a little aggressive for customer service representatives. Because they are the enemy. Oh. Jake paused, processing this information. Well, that's awkward. Can we just explain that we're new here and looking for directions? Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer, a nervous Zephyrian named Blitz who had drawn the short straw for this assignment. Put it through, Jake said cheerfully. Maybe they can help us out. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a Nexus Coalition commander who looked like he had been designed by someone with strong opinions about the effectiveness of intimidation. Commander Cragg had more facial scars than skin, cybernetic implants that glowed menacingly, and the sort of voice that could make small children cry from 3-star systems away. Zephyrian vessel, you have violated Coalition space and will be destroyed. Prepare to. Cragg paused, apparently noticing Jake sitting in the command chair. Who are you supposed to be? Jake Morrison, strategic consultant. Listen, I hate to bother you, but we're kind of lost. Could you point us toward the nearest active war zone? We're supposed to be ending a conflict, and frankly, we're running behind schedule. Commander Craig's scarred face went through several expressions, settling on confused irritation. You want us to give you directions to a battle? If it's not too much trouble. We've got GPS, but it doesn't seem to work out here, and honestly, space all looks the same after a while. You are in a Titan-class dreadnought. Yes, that's our ride. Pretty nice, isn't it? Just got it detailed. Torres buried her face in her hands. Pip was frantically taking notes. Grox made a rumbling sound that conveyed amusement. The Nexus Coalition commander stared at Jake with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing its picture. Are you insane? Cragg finally asked. Probably a little, but that's beside the point. Look, we're all professionals here. You're trying to fight a war, I'm trying to end a war. There's got to be some middle ground we can work with. Middle ground? We are enemies. Enemy is such a harsh word. Think of us as competitors in the peacemaking industry. You want to win through superior firepower. I want to win through superior negotiation. Different business models, same market. Commander Cragg looked like he was developing a headache. Superior negotiation? Absolutely. For instance, what's your primary objective in this engagement? Destroy us? Capture territory? Prove a point? Because honestly, from a cost-benefit perspective, engaging a Titan-class dreadnought seems like poor resource allocation, unless you've got a really good reason. We have 12 ships to your 1. Sure, but I bet your operational costs are through the roof. Fuel, ammunition, crew salaries, insurance premiums. Meanwhile, I'm operating on a fixed budget with performance incentives. I can afford to be patient." Torres whispered frantically, "What are you doing?" "Negotiating," Jake whispered back. "Trust the process." The standoff continued for several more minutes, with Jake treating the encounter like a particularly complicated car sale and Commander Cragg becoming increasingly bewildered by the humans' approach to warfare. Finally, Cragg made what would prove to be a critical mistake. He lost his temper. "Enough of this nonsense. All ships, attack formation Delta 7. Destroy that vessel." "Attack formation Delta 7? Jake repeated thoughtfully. "Is that the one where you surround us and fire from multiple angles?" "How did you—" "Yes." "Terrible choice, Captain Torres. Evasive maneuver pattern, Zebra 15. Torres stared at him. "We don't have an evasive maneuver pattern Zebra 15. "Then improvise. Make it up. Do something unexpected." Torres, operating on pure military instinct and the desperate hope that the human had some sort of plan, began a series of random course changes that would have made a drunken asteroid jealous. The cosmic vengeance lurched, spun, accelerated, decelerated, and performed what could generously be called evasive maneuvers if one had a very flexible definition of both evasion and maneuvers. The Nexus Coalition fleet, expecting standard Imperial tactics, found themselves completely unprepared for what appeared to be a massive warship having some sort of mechanical breakdown in the middle of a battle. Their carefully coordinated attack formation became a confused mess as ships tried to target a vessel that seemed to be moving according to no known laws of physics or tactical doctrine. In the resulting chaos, 3 coalition ships collided with each other, 2 more accidentally fired on their own forces, and Commander Cragg's flagship spun out of control while trying to follow the Cosmic Vengeance's inexplicable flight path. "Commander Morrison," Torres called out, her voice climbing several octaves, "they're retreating." Jake looked up from his coffee, which he had somehow managed not to spill despite the violent maneuvering. "They're what?" "Retreating." "We won." "We did? How about that?" Word of Jake's revolutionary tactical genius spread through the galaxy faster than gossip at a space station cantina. Within a week, both the Zephyrian Empire and the Nexus Coalition were sending delegations to meet with the legendary human strategist. Jake found himself hosting what was essentially a cosmic peace conference aboard the Cosmic Vengeance, despite having no qualifications for such a role beyond an impressive ability to confuse people. The conference room had been hastily modified to accommodate representatives from both sides of the conflict, plus Jake's increasingly nervous crew. Ambassador Kellen represented the Zephyrian Empire with the sort of diplomatic polish that could make a trade dispute sound like poetry. General Voss spoke for the Nexus Coalition with the kind of military bearing that made furniture stand at attention. "Gentlemen," Jake began, having learned that most alien species responded well to formal address regardless of their actual gender or number of heads, "thank you for coming. I think we can all agree that this war has gone on long enough." "Indeed," Ambassador Kellen agreed smoothly. "The human strategic approach has proven most enlightening." General Voss nodded grimly. "Your tactical innovations have forced us to reconsider our entire approach to warfare." Jake, who was still not entirely sure what his tactical innovations actually were, decided to lean into the mystery. "Well, you know what they say. Sometimes the best strategy is the one nobody expects." "Precisely." Pip chimed in enthusiastically. "Human unpredictability is legendary throughout the galaxy." Torres shot Jake a look that suggested she was beginning to suspect something. Perhaps the commander could explain his overall strategic philosophy? "My strategic philosophy," Jake repeated, buying time while trying to figure out what his strategic philosophy might be. "Right. Well, it's based on the fundamental principle that conflict resolution should focus on underlying causes rather than surface symptoms." This was actually not bad advice, though Jake had borrowed it from a motivational poster he'd once seen in a dentist's office. The assembled diplomats nodded thoughtfully. "Elaborate," General Voss requested. "Well, let me ask you this. Why are you fighting this war?" "To defend coalition territory from imperial expansion," Voss replied immediately. "To reclaim coalition-occupied systems rightfully belonging to the Empire," Kellen countered. "Right, but why do those systems matter?" "They contain valuable resources and strategic positions." "Which resources? Which strategic positions?" There was a pause. General Voss consulted his datapad. Ambassador Kellen did the same. Torres looked like she was beginning to understand where this was going. The Kepler Mining Consortium worlds," Voss said eventually. "Which were originally developed under Imperial Charter," Kellen added. "But the Kepler Mining Consortium went bankrupt 12 years ago," Jake pointed out, having absolutely no knowledge of this fact but gambling that bureaucratic incompetence was universal. "So what exactly are you fighting over?" Another pause. Longer this time. "The strategic value of the systems themselves," General Voss said, though he sounded less certain. "Strategic value for what? You just said the mining operations are defunct." Ambassador Kellen cleared his throat. "The systems serve as a buffer zone against enemy expansion." "Enemy expansion into what? More defunct mining systems?" Torres was now looking at Jake with something approaching admiration. Pip was scribbling notes frantically. Grox made a rumbling sound that conveyed philosophical appreciation. "Perhaps," Jake continued, "we could approach this from a different angle. What would it cost each side to simply walk away from these systems?" "Walk away?" General Voss sputtered. "We have invested 17 years of military resources, but sunk costs," Jake replied, using a term he had learned during his brief stint selling insurance. "You can't base future decisions on past investments if those investments aren't generating returns. This is a war, not a business transaction. All wars are business transactions. The question is whether you're getting a good return on investment." Over the next several hours, Jake managed to facilitate what was arguably the most ridiculous peace negotiation in galactic history. By treating the entire conflict as a customer service dispute between two companies fighting over a market that no longer existed, he gradually helped both sides realize that they were essentially spending enormous amounts of money to fight over empty space. "So let me see if I understand this correctly," Jake said, consulting notes he had been scribbling on napkins. "You've been fighting for 17 years over mining rights to systems that haven't been mined in 12 years, for a company that went bankrupt 11 years ago, over resources that aren't actually that valuable anymore, because someone invented synthetic alternatives 9 years ago." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when an entire room full of people simultaneously realizes they have been tremendously stupid for a very long time. "When you put it like that," Ambassador Kellen said slowly, "it does seem rather pointless." "Pointless?" General Voss exploded. "We have sacrificed millions of lives for this cause." "Which is exactly why we need to stop," Jake replied gently. "Look, nobody's questioning the courage or dedication of your people. But the best way to honor their sacrifice is to make sure nobody else has to make the same sacrifice for no good reason." "What do you propose?" Kellen asked. Jake took a deep breath, realizing he was about to either end a war or start 3 new ones. "I propose we settle this the way civilized beings should settle disputes over worthless real estate. We divide the systems equally, both sides declare victory, and everybody goes home." "Declare victory?" "Sure. You fought valiantly for 17 years and achieved your strategic objectives." They fought valiantly for 17 years and achieved their strategic objectives. Everybody wins, everybody saves face, and most importantly, everybody stops shooting at each other over empty space. 6 months later, Jake Morrison found himself sitting in the captain's ready room of the Cosmic Vengeance, staring at a plaque that read Interstellar Conflict Resolution Specialist and wondering how his life had taken such an absurd turn. The war between the Zephyrian Empire and the Nexus Coalition had officially ended with the Treaty of Reasonable Expectations, which was widely regarded as either a masterpiece of diplomatic innovation or the most elaborate practical joke in galactic history. Commander, Captain Torres announced, entering the ready room with her usual military precision. "We're receiving a distress signal from the Rigel sector." Jake looked up from his coffee, which had become something of a legend among the crew. Pip had started marketing it as Strategic Thinking Blend, and there was apparently a waiting list of Zephyrian officers hoping to try it. What kind of distress signal? Three-way territorial dispute between the Canopus Federation, the Vega Commonwealth, and the Rigel Free Traders. They've been fighting over shipping lanes for the past 5 years. Casualties are mounting, and all 3 sides have requested human strategic consultation. Jake sighed, the sound of a man who had accidentally stumbled into a career he never wanted and discovered he was surprisingly good at it. Let me guess. They're fighting over shipping lanes that probably aren't even profitable anymore. According to preliminary reports, yes, the lanes were vital when they carried rare earth elements from the Centauri mines, but synthetic production has made those elements largely obsolete. Of course it has. Jake stood up, straightening his uniform, which still felt like playing dress-up despite months of wear. "Well, I suppose someone has to talk sense into them." "We could be there in 4 days," Torres reported. "Shall I set course?" "Set course, Captain. And tell Pip to start preparing another one of his presentations on human tactical methodology. The kid loves that stuff." As the Cosmic Vengeance changed course toward the Rigel sector, Jake reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a small-time smuggler trying to make a living selling coffee beans to caffeine-deprived aliens. Now he was apparently the galaxy's foremost expert on ending conflicts through aggressive common sense and creative misunderstanding of military protocol. The really disturbing part was that it was working. The Treaty of Reasonable Expectations had held. Both former enemies were experiencing economic growth from not spending their entire budgets on military operations, and Jake was receiving requests for consultation from across the galaxy. "Sir," Pip announced over the comm system, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm, "I have completed my analysis of the Rigel situation. It appears to be a classic case of what human strategists call fighting over the last slice of pizza when everyone is full." "That's not actually a military term, Pip." "It should be. It perfectly describes at least 60% of the conflicts I have studied." Jake grinned despite himself. Pip had become something of a student of human strategic thinking, which mostly involved Jake making things up and the enthusiastic engineer treating them as profound wisdom. The kid had actually submitted a paper to the Imperial War College titled The Morrison Doctrine, Confusion as a Strategic Asset, which had somehow been accepted for publication. "Commander," Grox rumbled over the comm, his message translated by the ship's computer. "Grox wishes to know if we will be using the accidental victory through strategic bewilderment approach again." "That's not what we call it, Grox." "Grox says that is what the Nexus Coalition calls it." Torres entered the ready room again, this time carrying a data pad and wearing an expression that suggested either amusement or indigestion. "Sir, I've been monitoring galactic news feeds. There's a documentary being produced about your methods titled The Human Who Accidentally Ended a War." "Accidentally?" "They're calling it a new form of strategic thinking. Intentional incompetence is the term being used." Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "I'm not incompetent. I'm just creative." "Of course, sir. Will you be using creative methods to resolve the Rigel situation?" "Captain Torres, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I'm making this up as I go along, and somehow it keeps working. At this point, I'm afraid to change anything because I might break whatever cosmic joke is keeping me successful. Torres nodded seriously. That's very wise, sir. No, it's terrifying. But apparently terror and wisdom look the same from the outside. The ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Commander Morrison, came the voice of Admiral Zorton, the Zephyrian officer who had somehow become Jake's unofficial liaison with Imperial Command. We have received your fee for the Rigel consultation. My fee? My fee? 200,000 credits plus expenses as specified in your contract. Jake had forgotten he was technically a paid consultant now. The money was being automatically deposited into an account he had never actually set up, managed by a financial advisor he had never met, for a career he had never planned. Right. The fee. Of course. Also, the Galactic Mediation Council has officially recognized you as a certified interstellar conflict resolution specialist. Congratulations. Jake stared at the communication panel. I'm certified in something I'm making up as I go along. The certification process was quite rigorous. They analyzed your success rate, interviewed your crew, and reviewed your tactical innovations. You passed with the highest marks in the organization's history. This is the weirdest life ever, Jake muttered. Torres smiled, an expression that had become more common since their first mission. Sir, if it helps, the crew has complete confidence in your methods. You realize my methods are basically confuse everyone until they forget why they're fighting, right? Yes, sir. It's brilliant. Jake looked out the viewport at the stars streaming past as the cosmic vengeance headed toward its next impossible mission. Somewhere in the Rigel sector, three groups of aliens were preparing for a strategic consultation from a human expert who had learned everything he knew about conflict resolution from selling cars and accidentally winning a space battle through sheer confusion. You know what? Jake said, settling back into his chair with his coffee. I think I'm starting to like this job. The stars didn't answer, but Jake was pretty sure they were laughing with him, or at him. At this point, he wasn't sure there was a difference.